Hello, good evening, and welcome back. Good news. From the BBC News, Theresa May quits UK set for new PM by end of July. It'll be 7th of June. Theresa May has said she will quit as Conservative leader on 7th of June, paving the way for a contest to decide a new Prime Minister. It's just about time. As far as I'm concerned, she's been there for 3 years, but finally she's decided to give up the mantle and pass it on to somebody else. Boris Johnson seems to be the front runner at the moment, but Jeremy Hunt is also running. I haven't heard much from Jacob Rees-Mogg. I know that he said before that he doesn't intend to run, but he was the favourite for at least a short stint. But it is exciting times and also worrying times. Exciting because recently, with the MEP elections, it's difficult to know who's going to win. With thinking Brexit Party, and obviously that they don't have members, they have subscribers other than Nigel Farage, should he wish to try to become Prime Minister. He seems to have risen from the ashes, very Phoenix kind of thing. But the vote seems to be split not just among the two main parties, as it has been for a while, but amongst pretty much all of them, as well as independents, of course, including Tommy Robinson in the Northwest. Great. But you've also got the Lib Dems and the Greens, who are making a resurgence. Obviously, at the moment, under Sir Vince Cable, the Lib Dems are campaigning predominantly on a anti-Brexit platform, but the Greens are trying as well. It's all up in the air, so it's nice to be taken down to a more kind of level playing field where people can vote for a party that they agree with more so, instead of just voting against a party they disagree with. And it was mentioned by Mark Collett a little while ago that the thing with a referendum like Brexit is great to show that people don't agree with the party that they're voting for, because both Conservative and Labour were pro-EU and were receiving most of the votes, but then given the question of a referendum of Brexit which disagreed with them, Brexit won out. So it's nice to know that that's then taking a hammer blow to the establishment, and as it's crumbling down, other parties can rise up, and hopefully we'll see a more kind of diverse proportion from parties, showing that people can actually vote with their values instead of just against people they hate. And with that in mind, obviously Jeremy Corbyn is the likely next Prime Minister, which is terrifying if you ask me, because we don't need socialism. Please no. And he's ripped into Theresa May on Twitter as well, saying that the Conservative Party is disintegrating. And Nigel Farage has said similarly that now they've had two pro-EU Prime Ministers, it's about time they learn the lesson or just become destroyed as a party and no more. Theresa May was tearing up towards the end of her speech, considering that it seems that it's been very difficult for her, and it's fair enough. I don't at all think that it's an easy job. And it says here that she was 6 years as Home Secretary, and Tommy Robinson was able to meet her briefly when she didn't realise that she was meeting him, and made excuses and left as soon as possible. So it would be nice to have a Prime Minister who doesn't find Tommy Robinson abhorrent. Obviously, if you've still got either communists who hate free speech, so like Corbyn and McDonald, obviously, and if you've got elites like the Tory elites in the Westminster bubble, then they're not going to like Tommy Robinson, because it's very much a class issue now, and the Tories have been called a class party for as long as I can remember, and that goes back to the Second World War, obviously, which is, funnily enough, if you want to talk about who beat the Nazis, it was Conservatives, so tell me again about right-wingers then. But, okay, yeah, you're going to say that communists against Nazism. Fair enough. So Mrs May's voice shook as she ended her speech, saying, "I will shortly leave the job that has been the honour of my life to hold." It is the highest in the land. Good on her. The second female Prime Minister, but certainly not the last, so she is feminist to the core. I do so with no ill will, but with enormous and enduring gratitude to have had the opportunity to serve the country I love. Well, it does seem odd that you wish to destroy the country with open borders, for example, bringing in other cultures that don't assimilate, and it would be nice if we can stop that so that the English can have their identity back. I've got my St. George's flag, but I am worried about showing it around too much at a risk of being assaulted. Even though it is legal to fly any nation's flag from your property in the United Kingdom, or at the very least in England. And it is interesting to me how they mention female, because they have messages from other people, including, of course, Nicola Sturgeon, Prime Minister of Scotland, and Angela Merkel. And Angela Merkel is disconcertingly positive. German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she had always worked well with Mrs May, adding Britain's departure from the European Union is a major transition, and regardless of what happens now in Britain, the German government will do everything to achieve a good partnership, an orderly exit and good cooperation, and I hope that will remain the case in the future. Suggesting they're hoping to not leave. And they're Scotland's first minister, not prime minister, sorry. This, of course, comes back after Theresa May has just kept trying to push through deals and bad deals, and obviously with Jeremy Corbyn speaking up earlier on saying, oh, well, the EU are terrified of no deal, so let's just take that off the table. It's like, well, no. You say all options are open if you're going to negotiate, and it doesn't mean that you're going to do it. It's the same thing with Trident, and of course he said that in a nuclear attack he wouldn't want to fire back. It's like, well, okay, cool. So maybe you wouldn't, and that's fine if you think that's morally correct, but you can't let the other people know that. That's just game theory. And like, Russia's dead hand is apparently still up, which is that if they get annihilated, well, they essentially have like fuses or that kind of thing that stops their missiles being launched. And so as soon as that power is cut out, like from a nuclear attack or an earthquake, then their missiles will be fired. It's supposedly still up, but of course it might not be, but they have to say that to save face. And then yes, Lib Dem leader Sir Vince Cable said it was Mrs May's compromises with the right wing of her party were to blame, adding the best and only option remains to take Brexit back to the people. I believe the public would now choose to stop Brexit. I don't. And even Diane Abbott said, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. And the polling's been all over the place. The polling has been appalling, as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, here we have Farage chiming in saying the two Conservative leaders whose instincts were pro-EU, and now they've gone, the party either learns that lesson or it dies. So it's going to be exciting times ahead. Yes, Jeremy Corbyn is saying that she's been a disaster and that it's only right for her to call an election. But of course in Britain it's odd that the government in power can call an election within 4 years of them gaining office. So if they think it's going well for them, then of course they'll call another one, which is what they tried last time, but failed appallingly, and therefore joining with the DUP in Ireland. And I believe their head person is also a female, and it does mention it. Yes, here we are. DUP leader Arlene Foster, whose party supported May's government in power after the Conservatives lost their majority in the 2017 election, praised Mrs May's dutiful approach on national issues. So there seems to be very much a party approach, but Farage is obviously on the attack. I think he's hoping to be Prime Minister with his Brexit party, if not with UKIP, even though this seems to be more dictatorial. And I think, probably like many of you, that she'd wait until after the European election in the hope of garnering as many votes for the Conservatives as possible, so that it wasn't fractured. Of course, if she did this a couple of months ago, then maybe we wouldn't have need to have had them, and they could have had better support if they had a stronger leader, especially somebody who was pro-Brexit. But nonetheless, it's exciting times now that the field is open to everyone, and I look forward to where it turns out. And the last thing about the EU elections, I was tempted to make this its own video, but I'll tag it on here, that there have been many EU citizens in the UK who have not been able to vote because of a mix-up with a UC1 form, as I said, and my girlfriend is European, living in the United Kingdom as well, so she was unable to vote. Obviously, she was planning on voting Tommy as well, and most of the outlaw has been from pro-Remain people saying that we weren't allowed to vote. But I'm guessing that was just done to try and say, oh, well, Brexit wasn't a fair referendum because of how the money was garnered before that, therefore we should call another one, to now say the same with these elections, to say, well, this wasn't a fair election because foreign nationals in the UK couldn't vote, and that's obviously going to be for the losers. And the other thing was, in Manchester Evening News, when going through the parties of who to vote for, what the stance on Brexit is and all that, they included all the parties available, but did not include any mention of Tommy Robinson at all. And I still think that if Tommy Robinson gets in, Carl gets in, and I'm sure Carl Benjamin will invite Molly Yiannopoulos to speak there as well, then every effort will be made to stop them being there by leaving the EU beforehand. Boris Johnson said he wants it done by the end of October, which means there will still be time for Carl Benjamin and Tommy Robinson to make an appearance, so I do look forward to that. But that's it for me, so have a good evening, and share the good news. We can celebrate 7th of June, I'm sure. And the results for the EU elections are on Sunday, so check back then, and goodbye.